I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're going to dye 3 different types of roving in a cold process shoebox technique again. But this time I'm going to pre-soak our fiber. The 3 fiber blends we're looking at today are Knitpicks Swish Roving. This roving is 100% superwash merino wool. We have Wool of the Andes Roving, which is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. And then we have Gloss Roving, which is 70% merino wool, 30% silk. Now, the Wool of the Andes and the Gloss are non-superwash. The Swish is superwash. So it does absorb colors a lot faster, and it's more absorbent. The last time I tried this type of technique and I'll talk more about the cold process approach in a minute. I'm just unknotting the Swish fiber, if I can. There we go. Okay. Now, Swish is really, really absorbent. But the last time I tried this, I set up the dry fiber in the shoebox and poured liquid on top. Now, if the fiber is super absorbent, like the Swish, we could end up with variegated colors. But if our fiber is not that absorbent, like the Wool of the Andes or the Gloss, the liquid I poured on top just sort of pooled off and ran to the bottom. So it immediately blended all of the colors, removing our chance of getting something a little bit more variegated, even though we still ended up with really, really pretty fiber. And so I want to try this again. We'll probably use different colors. I haven't decided about the colors. But the main difference is that we're going to pre-soak all the fiber first in just plain tap water. In each of these shoe boxes, I have 8 cups of water. It's going to be okay if we have some dry patches, although I will be pre-soaking things overnight. A dry patch wouldn't be a problem, but we want to be able to add our dye and have it sort of stay where we've put it. And so for that, I'm going to need to get the fiber wet. Now you can see the Swish sunk in really quickly. Wool of the Andes can be absorbent, but it kind of needs more, like if there's heat, then it'll sink in pretty easily if it's dry. But again, just pouring water on it, the water just sort of ran off. And so that didn't work super well. I think the Gloss is probably the least absorbent. But anyway, I did just learn today as I'm filming this that Knitpicks has a few other roving variants. Of the 3 that I have here, the Swish is the newest, but there's some high desert roving, even a tweed. And so I will be checking those out at some point. But if you want to learn more about any of the tools or equipment I'm using today, I have links and affiliate links down in the video description. And I may earn a commission if you make a purchase through one of my affiliate links. Now I am pressing the fiber down to remove the air. And you can see those bubbles come up as I press. And so as I remove the air, then the water can sink in a little bit, allowing things to get wetter. Now, normally I do recommend pre-soaking silk blends a little bit longer. It takes a little bit more time to get well saturated. And I should have listened to my own advice last time. I just thought that there was a chance it could work dry. And you know, everything that doesn't work out as I expect is a learning opportunity for all of us. But anyway, that's why we're pre-soaking things this time. And eventually, we will be dyeing the fiber in these shoe boxes. The technique that I'll be doing today is what I like to call cold process. What on earth is cold process dyeing, and why do I choose to do it? When you're dyeing yarn or fiber with acid dyes, you need a protein-based yarn. You need acid, you need the acid dyes, water, and heat. At some point you need heat so that way the dyes can bind to your fibers. And heat speeds, any of these variables could speed up the process. But you can also use time as a variable in there. And then by doing a soak at room temperature, or maybe slightly warmer if it's summer or with the heat of the sun outside, you can let the dyes slowly absorb to the yarn. And this can make it easier for a small batch dyer like me to set up 3 side-by-side examples to showcase here, because otherwise I would probably be limited to dyeing 2 types side by side, and then maybe I could bring a third in at the end, but it wouldn't be like 3 side by side giving us that comparison. So it allows me to, okay, as I said, do the comparison, but it also allows me to process more fiber at once, because after a couple of days, then I'll go ahead and steam set things. And often a 30-minute steam set is a shorter use of time of my dye pot on the stove than a 30-minute and letting everything cool off for a couple hours process in a catering steam pan or a kettle that I might otherwise do with roving. So it allows me to set up more projects and process more projects. Now, another perk of a cold process technique is it can help you get more coverage on your yarn or fiber, because since you're slowing things down, things aren't hot, you have more opportunities to stir things and to distribute the color over your yarn. Of course, you can still get tonal things, but it gives you some more options. But anyway, let's go back to the fiber. Honestly, even a brief soak like we have here is starting us off in a better place than we had the other day. There are certainly dry patches in the fiber still, but if I were to pour the dyes on, we have more opportunity for it to spread throughout our fiber than we did last time. However, I'm gonna set these aside probably just overnight, and we will come back to this most likely tomorrow to add our color. But I still think we could get away with bringing the dyes over now and doing all that right now. For our dyes today, I used 3 stock solutions that I made earlier this month: dark navy, deep magenta, and pecan brown. All of these were mixed at a 1% stock solution, and I measured out 1 tablespoon or 15 milliliters of each color into a cup. We're going to use the exact same amount of dye on all of our roving. After adding the dye to our cups, I added a 1/4 cup of water, or about 60 milliliters, to each of these containers. This will allow me to spread the dyes out a little bit more. I don't know if we'll be stirring things on the roving itself or not, but at least now we have our colors pretty measured, which will make my life easier momentarily. It is the next day, and we could have some dry patches here on our gloss roving. I'm going to press it one more time. Same with the wool of the Andes. And then our swish, which also could have some dry patches, but this one was way easier to pre-soak than the others. Now, there's, again, no acid in each of these containers, and I think we're just going to start adding our dyes. And I don't know if I'm going to be moving the fiber at some point, if we're going to just sort of let these colors pour on and then see what they do. Leaving some white behind. I think my plan depends a little bit on how this step works and what we see, and probably after we wait a little bit. Because unlike other types of fiber that I've dyed in a shoebox like this and poured the dye on, there isn't really as much space for the dye to move down towards the bottom this time, because the 8 cups of water are pretty much filled with the fiber, and so I'm seeing a lot of movement along the actual surface, but not so much down. Maybe along the edge, that back edge, I'm seeing a little bit. I'm trying to pour our navy dye down along the back, but you can see we found like a little river that it's moving down. Okay, things actually seem to be moving through in the wool of the Andes. I see some pink going towards the bottom. It just might be slow. And things can't, even if I had 3 of the exact same roving type, we would not have the exact same results in our shoe boxes right now. So I really want that to be clear. Because, I mean, we're seeing very similar things, but just the way that it's in would have some variation, and so we would have some differences. So I want to keep some expectations a bit tempered. The pecan brown is seeming a little bit lighter than the other colors to me right now, but maybe it won't later. Ooh, I'm gonna have to decide if we're gonna add acid now or how much I wanna wait before I add acid. Ooh, okay, because what I can say now is with the swish, looking at the side, things aren't moving that far down in the center. On the other colors, it is moving down a little bit. Part of me wants to not move anything, but then the other part of me really wants to move things and blend and see what we end up with. But either way, I'm gonna set a timer. Let's just wait 10 minutes and then decide. Because what I could do is come in, add some acid, and sort of wiggle, maybe start with the pink, wiggle the color through a little bit, and we still may observe differences. I don't think I'm gonna pick up the fiber and put it back down, although I could. That would be a lot more like what I do with some yarns. So maybe we'll do that. That could be fun. I don't know, it's so hard. All right, I'll see you in 10 minutes. I made up my mind. We are gonna treat this similar to the way we might do other yarn. So I would say right now, and I'm not moving the camera to show you, there's more movement of the color around the edges, and otherwise mostly where the color or the dye has sort of found a little bit of space between the roving versus soaking through it. So I think I want to move it, and what I'm going to do is add 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar, come in with my hands, lift, and lower, and sort of wiggle the fiber. We may still have white sections in here, but, oh, this is so freaking pretty. Oh my goodness. This is gorgeous. And so we may end up with more similarities than I thought is possible. Okay, we're gonna do 3 tablespoons, 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar, and gonna grab it sort of in the middle, lift the fiber, 1, 2, 3, lower it back down, sort of wiggle things through a little bit to work that color through. And you know what? We do still have a little bit of a gradient there. I would say things are more muted. I think we have a little bit more blending going on because I think less of the color stuck. Not with no acid, I would expect the color to stick, but my tap water is slightly acidic. 2, 3, and I'm adding the acid approximately where I have placed 1, 2, 3 the dyes, and that is just mainly so that way you know, there's a chance that some of that color will sort of stay put. Ooh, this is so pretty. I may be obsessed. Now, I arranged, whoops, did not mean to do that. I arranged the fiber in these a little bit randomly. And by that, I mean, I didn't rearrange the fiber. It's sort of going a little bit like this, but it's mostly how it was already wound and tied up. So it's not gonna be regular repeating. In these shoe boxes, we could arrange the fiber so that way we get a gradient. We could arrange it in a way that would be more regular repeating. But I would say the way things look right now, it almost looks like I have a light source over here because These ones are more muted and there feels like a lightness right here. Our superwash yarn, sorry, our superwash fiber has more variation in there, and I could have mixed it less. That is absolutely a possibility. I don't think I did though. I am very excited. My hypothesis is that some of the dyes sort of stayed where I originally placed them with the swish and not as much with the other two. But either way, this is gorgeous fiber, and I'm really excited to see how it turns out. And I don't even think that I mentioned that I picked the amount of dye so that way we would have about 0.45 grams of dye total per 100 grams of fiber, because I don't want to do too much dye and then have to wash it out and have problems arise that way. Now, I've placed the lids on, mainly because my kids will be home from school any moment, but I am planning to place these outside at least overnight, maybe for a couple of days. It is Wednesday at about noon right now. I will probably leave them on my counter for about 15 minutes before I move them outside. And the rationale there is that when I move it, I'm going to be lifting and the liquid in here may move around a little bit. So just by giving things a little bit of time to settle and sort of stay in place, maybe colors start striking, maybe they don't. Not a big deal either way, but in 15 minutes, I'll go ahead and take these outside. And it is a gorgeous October day. It is in the mid-70s in Massachusetts. So they will get some warmth out there. We're now outside with some lovely construction noise. But it's very sunny, again, mid-70s, so things are gonna heat up and it might actually get quite warm in there. So even though I call this cold process, it just means that I'm not using a heat source other than the sun or my environment. You could also maybe consider this solar dyeing. I don't know, the cold process makes sense for me. If it was freezing outside, I would just leave these somewhere indoors, and so then they would remain at room temperature until the dye had absorbed. But again, the nice thing about this cold process technique overall is that it allows me to deal with, we may as well take a peek at some of our pretty, oh my gosh. It allows me to do more samples side by side all at once. And in one day, I could very easily use, I think I have over a dozen shoeboxes now, do over a dozen different hanks of roving. Whereas if I was doing these on my stove, I wouldn't be able to process as much because if it was really hot, I'd want it to cool before I went and washed it. So anyway, I will see you tomorrow or the next day maybe. And we'll see, because the last time, I don't know which one's the wool of the Andes. Maybe you. You could be the wool of the Andes. The last time the wool of the Andes took a little bit more time for all the dyes to strike. And so we'll check in before we go ahead and start steam setting the fiber. 28, 29 hours later, let's just do a quick check. Clear. There's some spots there. Let's see how you are. Ooh, clear. That looks like our superwash one though. I did not put these in the same order. I think I thought that I did. Haha, just like last time, the wool of the Andes has a lot of color in there. Let me grab some acid. I mean, at least I'm assuming that this one's the wool of the Andes. 1, 2, 3. Just double the acid. Yeah. Alright, we'll see how this goes after another couple of days. But it's interesting that things are consistent. It's been about 48 hours since I first set this up. And I think here we have our silk fiber. Sorry, there's construction or something going on. This is our gloss roving. I'm gonna go ahead and steam set this. Ooh, look at that light in there. Oh, that's pretty. I'm gonna pop it in. We're doing this all outside. And actually, I'm gonna make some space. Add some liquid to the steamer basket. So you know what? I'm just gonna add this water. That's not a problem. Let that drain a little bit. There we go. That's enough to steam set this. Now, I only think I can fit about 200 grams of roving in here right now, which is not a problem because I think only 200 grams of roving is ready to go. Here is our Swish DK. Swish DK, ha! I'm so used to saying that. Our Swish roving. The colors are vibrant and beautiful. Now, as for our wool of the Andes, I think the colors are getting lighter. Yeah, this other end definitely had less color, but we're gonna leave things out here. I will rotate it because the sun is coming from over here. But we have what promises to be another gorgeous, hot October day in New England. So I'm gonna put a lid on this and go steam set things for 30 minutes. And we'll leave our wool of the Andes to sit outside for longer. The thing about this that's interesting is twice with the cold process, the wool of the Andes has taken longer to strike, which really makes me feel that the gloss absorbs color faster. I think that we have conditions such that I feel like I can say that we're seeing a trend. I may add a little more acid into here later. Actually, let's do that. Oh, construction sounds. Okay, let's add this. I'm not measuring it, just adding it in. All right, and now we will just wait and we'll see you maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday. Today's Friday. We'll see. It's not gonna hurt the fiber to sit out longer. The 30 minutes are up and the camera wasn't recording, so you missed me gently lifting the fiber out of the steamer basket into this container where I'm gonna let it cool completely. Now, we have whites in both from resist that we had. We may have lifted the fiber and put it back down, but there were some areas that didn't get color. And this is really exciting because unlike yarn, where maybe I would be sad if there was white, in fiber, I get a little excited because that can add some really cool blending in. Now, there could be times that I would be sad to see this, and so maybe this means, and specifically like with the silk, it means I need to like push the colors through a little more, move the fiber. I'm sitting here doing this like wiggling motion off camera. But anyway, I'm excited to see this today because it's just fun because I'm playing around with this technique on fiber. And yeah, it's nice to see some similarities between the two yarn pieces that absorb the color the fastest. But anyway, we'll wash it once it's cold. It is currently Monday morning and it's a normal October day that's 40 outside. And Thursday will be 80 again. So that is what it is. Ooh. Ooh. There's like, oh no, those are, is that dye coming off or? Yeah, that's dye coming out. Okay, I'm gonna squeeze out a lot of the liquid. All right, we didn't absorb all the color, and we definitely have some gradient action, even though it is asymmetric, like it'll be repeating-esque. I'm gonna go steam set this. Okay, it's really cold, so I'm gonna put it down in the steamer basket. Oh, my hands are cold from that. Okay, I'm gonna rinse everything out, and we can go talk by the steamer basket. Oh, I don't get cold easily, but holding that really, really made my hands cold. I'm gonna steam for 45 minutes instead of the normal 30, just because it was so cold. I wanna give time for things to warm up, and so I hope that that should be good. So everything else is gonna be off camera today. I'm gonna steam set this for 45 minutes, remove it, set it aside to cool completely to room temperature, and then we can wash it. And now we'll go in to show you the washing of our other fibers as well. I started off washing our superwash Stroll Roving. And it's funny because this is both the one I'm least worried about felting and the one I'm most worried about falling apart. But the main thing I wanted to do is make sure things had time to really soak. That way, if there is undissolved dye, there's a chance for it to come out. But I used a little bit of dish soap and there was no bleeding. And similarly, when we got to the gloss roving, there also was no bleeding. This one I wasn't worried about falling apart, but you do want to be gentle and careful because now there's a little more of a concern of felting. It's silly that it's different with each one. And I'm still waiting for the wool of the Andes to finish cooling, so we will check that one next. And that's the one that'll be the biggest bleeding risk. I went to wash the wool of the Andes and there was no bleeding. I started dancing off camera. I was so happy. Now, just because there's a little bit of dye left in a cold process vat doesn't mean that there would be color bleeding, but it means that there could be after the steam setting. But I think that with this fiber, it just needed to get a little bit warmer for those last colors to strike. Either way, I'm not sad. I left a tiny bit of dye behind, and I put this fiber through my spin dryer and hung it up to dry. So now we can see what everything looks like. Well, these differences are quite dramatic. Here we have our Swish roving, our Wool of the Andes roving, and our gloss roving. And again, the gloss is 70% merino wool, 30% silk. Wool of the Andes is 100% Peruvian Highland wool. And Swish is 100% superwash merino wool. And these are three very different colorways. Oh my gosh. Like the superwash, okay, the colors struck quickly. We have a lot less blending over there. Sure, it makes sense. On our non-superwash wool, tons of blending, great coverage. But what surprised me was the silk, that we have this white left. Because, I mean, I lifted everything up and put it back in, but it's possible that we could have had some dry patches here even with the overnight pre-soak. But I don't think that's it. I think that the colors are striking faster here than they are to the Wool of the Andes. And that is just so intriguing to me. I mean, we know the colors are striking faster to the merino silk blend because the dye exhausted faster on that yarn than it did on the Wool of the Andes, and I needed to add a lot more acid. So maybe the Wool of the Andes would benefit from scouring the fiber or like washing it with soap beforehand, even though that makes me a little nervous. But either way, we ended up with a beautiful color there. It's just different from the other two. Don't get me wrong, all three are gorgeous. They're just very different. The three colorways are so different, but they also go really well together. And one fun thing about spinning your own yarn is that you don't need to worry as much about, especially if you're going to hand wash and dry flat your object. You can mix different fiber contents on different plies. And so you could combine something soft like this with something more variegated. Now, I feel like something I need to try to do is get a soft colorway on this Swish base because it just soaks up color so fast that I need to try to do a tonal on it. I mean, now I'm blanking on how tonal or not tonal the fiber was from my last video, but I think we had variation there. So I'd like to try to see if I can get something soft on this base, but I don't know. I can't believe how different these three came out. And I'm so excited. The reason why I'm so excited is that I dye different yarn bases side by side all the time. In my spring or summer mini skein mini series, I'm always looking at different yarn bases and doing the same technique on them. And a lot of times things are really similar. So it's really fun to do something side by side and get such a dramatic difference because that doesn't always happen. A lot of times things are very similar and the differences are subtle. And today our differences are not subtle. But it's not just today. So because I've done this so quickly back to back, I feel like I can really make some conclusions, especially with regards to the Wool of the Andes absorbing color slower than the gloss. I don't think that that's something I ever really considered before. And so I don't know if it's about the silk. I don't know if it's merino versus Wool of the Andes. I don't have an answer as to why, except that consistently I see that it takes the Wool of the Andes more time to soak up color than gloss. And I don't know, that really excites me. But anyway, if you love the fiber I dye and want to try to bring some home, there may still be some available in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. I dye more yarn than unspun fiber, so sometimes the fiber can go pretty quickly. But if I don't have any fiber in the shop and you want some of my hand-dyed fiber, it is an option for a lab partner listing where you can pick the base and we can chat about the roving that you'd like me to dye. You pick the base for me to dye, and then I'll create a video with you in mind, avoiding your least favorite colors. And I think that that is all just a lot of fun, and so that's a way that you know that the fiber will still be there in the shop. You can find links to everything down in the video description, or if you have questions about inventory or a specific listing, you can message me on Etsy. Just please keep the Etsy DMs to things related to the shop versus general dyeing conversation. I do try to read YouTube comments and try to reply to as many of them as I can. But anyway, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.